Hi everyone and welcome to the sew along for the t-shirt. So this pattern is a knit fabric, and because it has negative ease you're going to need something with both vertical and horizontal stretch to make sure that it fits your body properly. So the details of that are on the website. This pattern has a 6mm, which is 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So when you're ready, set your overlocker up with 4 threads of colour that match your fabric. Set your stitch width to 6mm, 1/4 inch, and do a test run on spare fabric just to check your tensions before you begin. So we're also just going to overlock on the raw edge. You don't need to cut any fabric off with your overlocker blade. So you're going to need a way of finishing the hem. If you're using a plain sewing machine, make sure you put a ball needle that will stop your fabric from having any runs. Also, it might be handy to lengthen the stitch length from normal, so you could do a test stitch on spare fabric before you start to check that. The other thing is that we could use a cover seamer for the hems, or you could use a normal sewing machine with a twin needle inserted in it. It's just really whatever you prefer. So I'll show you how to do this just based on the fact you might have a plain sewing machine and an overlocker. So let's begin, and we'll start with the cuff version. Now if you're sewing just the straight sleeve, just skip this part. So here are our cuff pieces. We have 2 of them. They're identical. On the long edge you'll have a notch, and that notch is going to sew to the notch at the bottom of the sleeve. And the main thing we need to know about this is you make sure that the stretch runs across like so. So when you're ready, take one of these cuffs and place them right sides together. And we're going to overlock the unnotched edge. And then just repeat that for the other cuff. And now what we're going to do is turn them so that they are wrong sides together, or right side out. So all you need to do is pop your hand in and just turn it like that. And make sure those notches match. And make sure those seams match. And do that for both cuffs, and then just pop them away somewhere safe before we move on. Okay, so we're going to sew the shoulder seam now. The process is the same for the t-shirt with the seam at the shoulder or the yoke seam, which is towards the front. All we're going to do is put the back to the front, right sides together at that shoulder or forward shoulder area, and match the seams. Now you'll see that there'll be a slight overlap like this at each end. And that's exactly what we want, because what we want to happen is we want to make sure the fabric exactly touches at the 6mm 1/4 inch mark. And if we do that, then this will fit in properly and the transition will be nice and smooth. So make sure you've got just a tiny triangle like this over the top, but 6mm 1/4 inch in is exactly where this sits. So making sure that's right side together, overlock across that shoulder line. And now go across and do the other shoulder. If you're sewing the hooded t-shirt version, what you need to do is sew the hood and put it in when you put the neckband on. So take your hood pieces and match them so they're right side together. And then what we're going to do is sew the long curve seam, which is the back of the head. So from the base of the neck through to what would be the top of the head. Now on the way, there are double notches to match. They're about part way through, somewhere along here. There they are there. So you have to make sure that those match because it's very easy for this to stretch out of shape. So, right, so when we've sewn that seam together, there's our hood there. The next thing we need to do is hem the opening that's going to be the centre front. So now we need to sew the hem of the hoodie, the side that is against the face, and you'll notice at the base on the neck edge there's 2 notches. The first notch shows us the turn position, and that's at 2 centimetres, which is 3/4 of an inch, and the second notch matches to our centre front. So there's going to be an overlap. That notch and the notch from the other side is going to overlap each other. So for now what I'm going to do is on this long straight edge, and you could twin needle this or cover seam it into place, I'm going to overlock the raw edge, I'm going to turn it and then sew a plain seam. So you could press this into place first if you like. Just fold that at the first notch and then stitch that through the overlocking line. Right, so I'm just going to sew another row of stitching parallel to the first. When you've finished doing that, place the hood so it's this side over this side, so it's right over left as if you were wearing it, and just match those notches at the bottom. And then tack stitch that lower edge into place through the seam allowance. So you want to stitch it about 1/8 of an inch, which is around about 3 mil, or an edge stitch, just to hold that centre front opening into place like so. So with regards to the hood, if you wanted to, you could just sew the hood into place now, or you can do what I'm going to do is sew the hood into place and have a neckband as well. In order to make this work properly, we need to make sure the order we put this in is correct. If we don't put this in the correct way, when we're wearing the hood, it can pull the neckband out of place. So we don't want to have it so that the neckband's on the bottom and then we have the hood. We want the hood and then the neckband sandwiched on the outside. And it's probably quite good we have a contrast colour so you can see what we're doing. Now as I said, you can just put the hood in at this stage if you want to, and certainly if you find it's going to be too, or you think it's going to be too bulky, you could skip the neckband as well. It's really up to you. So what we want to do is, you'll find it easier if you turn the garment wrong side out and make sure that your hood is right side out. So we're going to pop that in the middle and we're going to match that area we tack stitched, which has the notch in it there, to the centre front notch. So we want all of that in the same place. And just hold that in place with a pin. And in a moment we'll put the neckband in as well. Then the seam at the back matches to the centre back notch, the centre of those notches. And then you'll find there's a notch on either side for the shoulder area. So if you have the yoke version, there'll still be a notch there for you to match, but it won't be matching to the seam. It only matches to the seam on the version you have, which is the shoulder version. Okay, so we're going to overlock that in between those points. And certainly if you feel there's too many layers, you could tack stitch that in with your sewing machine as well. So what I want to do now is I want to put my neckband in as well. So what I'm doing is I'm going to match the centre back, which is the seam on my neckband, to the back there. And certainly if you're using a bulky fabric, well, I'm actually sewing with that Hachi today, or Hachi, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. This may be too much for the overlocker, but we'll find out. And then match through the centre front, and then there'll be notches on your band as well, there and here on the other side. There it is, hiding from me. Now it's a good idea, before you go any further, just check those positions. So turn this through and just check everything is sitting the way you want it to. So this is the way I want it to sit, because I want to have the neckband on the inside. So let's go ahead and overlock that into place. Now the neckband can really be sewn on at any point, but I'm going to do it now because it's probably easy to manipulate the fabric. Take your neckband and place it right side together and overlock the short edge. Now I probably should have changed colours because I'm doing mine in a contrast, but I really don't think it's going to make a huge difference. Now we're going to refold it so that wrong sides are together. So the seam we've just sewn is the centre back, and directly opposite that seam you'll find notches, and those notches are to match to the centre front, and then part way down you'll see notches as well, and those notches are going to match to our shoulder seam. So if you're sewing the version with the shoulder seam on the shoulder, the plain t-shirt, that's where that goes, and I'll show you that on the version with the forward, the yoke effect front, there's a notch that will match that too, which is the original shoulder position. So take your garment, now place it wrong sides out. You might find it easier to do it this way. In the middle of the back there's two notches. So the seam we just sewed is going to sit exactly in the centre of those two notches. So I'm going to put that there like so. Now if you find it easier, you could tack stitch the raw edge of that band together just to hold it into place within the seam allowance before we sew. Depends on the type of fabric you're using. Okay, so let's come across towards the shoulder area. Now if you're sewing the version with the forward yoke, there's a notch here, so that notch is going to match to the notches here on the band, and we're simply going to ease that to fit when we sew. So hold that in place there, and make sure if you are using pins that you use ball pins. And the other thing is just to doubly make sure you're not going to put holes in your fabric. Make sure you pin within that 6mm 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, just in case. The other thing to be very careful of is to not cut your notches too deep. So now I'm just pinning the centre front together, and I'll come round and I'll pin those last notches to the shoulder. Right, so that's ready to overlock into position. When you overlock this in, it's a good idea to not start from the centre back or the centre front. Try and start from around one of the shoulders somewhere. So I'm going to start from this side here. It's really up to you. We want the seam to face towards the front there. So get all 3 edges nice and tightly together. So if you're like me and you've cut your notch a little bit too deep, just make sure when you sew it you are careful to hide that. Right. So the main thing is to make sure when you stretch that you distribute the ease nice and evenly between those set points, the notches. And all I'm going to do is just gently stretch that band out to suit. Make sure you take your pins out as well. Okay, so now we're going to sew the sleeves in. So you have a pair of sleeves, which means you've had one cut out this way and one cut out this way. At the centre of the top there's a notch, and that's the crown notch, and that notch needs to match to the shoulder seam if you're sewing the version with the shoulder seam, or it needs to sew to the notch that's the shoulder seam on the yoke version. And as we come down one side you'll see a notch as well, and that shows us this is the back, and this will match to a notch on the back of the armhole. So first things first, take one of your sleeves and place it right sides together to your garment. So there's my notch there on the back, and right sides together, that needs to match to the notch on my sleeve. And then as we come around, so this is the yoke version, there's the notch there, that is going to match to our sleeve. And then the other points are just the beginning and end. So come to the underarm position here of the armhole and match the beginning. So we need to distribute the ease between those notch positions. So just gently stretch this out to fit. Okay, so just check your work and make sure you've caught everything properly, and then go ahead and repeat that on the other side. So now we're going to sew the side seam and the underarm. So come from the wrist to the hemline, doesn't matter which direction you sew it in. Match your side seams here, so this is my front and my back. And now go and repeat that on the other side. So now it's time to sew our cuffs into place. This is if you're sewing the version with the cuffs. If you're not, just skip this step. So at the lower part of the sleeve, at the midway point here, you'll see a notch. Now if you've forgotten to put it in, just go ahead and pop it in now. Take one of these cuffs and place it inside. So what we want to do is match the seamed area and hold that in place. And then we want to match the notches directly opposite. Now you're going to have to stretch the cuff to fit it, but it's only a slight stretch. Now some people might have this cuff attachment here on their overlocker, in which case you can use that. I don't find it all that helpful myself. What I'm going to do is just overlock that together like this. Okay, so go ahead now and repeat that for the other sleeve. So now we're moving on to sewing our hems. If you have a cover stitch, you can cover stitch these. You'll see a notch at the hemline, and that notch is 1.5 centimeters, which is 9/16 of an inch. Or you could twin needle the hem into place if you prefer. After you've done the body hem, if you're sewing the plain t-shirt sleeve hem, you can do the sleeve hem at the same time. So all I'm going to do is overlock and then plain stitch into place. So I've thought quite hard about which colour to sew this hem in, and I'm really struggling. I thought I might do it in 2 colours, but no, I've made a decision to do it in the pink, the salmon colour. But you could, of course, if you've got 2 fabrics, do it in 2 colours. Right, so fold your hem at the notch position, which is 1.5 centimeters, and then stitch your hem into place. Now I've decided to sew a second row of stitching close to my first, parallel to it, just to create the same effect as a cover seamer. So just be aware, if you do use plain sewing machine stitches like I am, these may snap if they've put under any pressure widthways. It's not ideal to use a plain stitch. If you have a domestic sewing machine with a zigzag stitch or one of the decorative stitches, you can certainly use those for hem as well as a twin needle. Ideally the cover seamer is the correct machine to use, but we're just going to use what we've got. So thanks for joining me with this video. I hope you enjoy this garment. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to you joining me for my next sew along video soon.